So welcome everyone, welcome to the Data Transformation series, to this latest episode with the absolute data whisperer expert, and we'll find out a bit more about that, Scott, shortly. So Scott Taylor, and my co-host again today is Anne-Marie Smith. So Scott, we'll ask you maybe to give a few words about yourself first. I'm really intrigued by this Data Whisperer title, and then we'll hand over to Anne-Marie just to say hi and maybe to kick off with a few questions.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer. I help calm data down. That's what we all do in the data management space, is calm data down. But as I get going, big spoiler alert here, I don't actually do a lot of whispering. I save that for the data, but I'm out there, you know, selling, telling, and yelling about the strategic power and value of proper data management and how that is critical to everything any enterprise does that has anything to do with technology. That's the scope. I limited the scope to that, just that. But I create content, webinars, events, do podcast interviews, that sort of stuff with technology brands and with enterprises to help them amplify and support and evangelize their messaging around getting stakeholder involvement and executive attention and funding for data management. And I say that distinctly and specifically versus the world of business intelligence, which we can dive into, how I divide that world up there for simplicity's sake. Because when you look at the super cool, exciting stuff like data science and all that, that gets way too much money, way too much attention, way too much credit, and is completely dependent on the kind of work I think I try and help focus people on.
Really cool. And also, before I forget, you have an excellent book out as well, Scott. I don't know, even you normally have a copy on your desk.
Oh, wait, here it is. Yes, telling your data story. I tried to put all this together here. Tell your data storytelling for data management versus the analytics data storytelling that's going on out there. I felt there was room in the space for a second type.
Yes.
As you can see on here, 99% buzzword free. I did not want to overpromise.
Yeah. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Focusing on this need to be able to tell the story of why data management is so important, with kind of classic data storytelling being about analytics and business intelligence and putting that in a business context to drive a decision. Super important. There's like 30 books out on that topic. I'm not diminishing it at all, but where was, as usual, and Anne-Marie, I know you've suffered through this for your whole career too, right? As usual, where was the voice of data management?
Right.
Didn't hear it. It just assumes you have good data, which is a really dangerous assumption.
And that's where I want to go with my question, Scott. You know me, you know we've both been in this data management space, frustrated for many years about the lack of attention to effective, sustainable data management. How have you seen that landscape change over the last few years, and where do you see it evolving to in the next couple of years?
If you look at, I think I see in terms of data management's role in all these macro trends. So what I've seen happen is, as usual, the macro trends getting all the attention, whether today it's digital transformation or the IoT or the metaverse or Web 3.0 or hyper-personalization, account-based marketing, contactless engagement, if that's a category yet, everything that happened through COVID. All these things are capturing the hearts and minds and the attention of the business side, and to a great extent, a lot of the analytic leaders. But if you look back at where we came from, right, there wasn't, a lot of those things didn't exist, but you still needed data management to get stuff done, master data, reference data, metadata, whether it was just kind of transactional stuff, operational reporting, analytical insight. So I kind of feel like data management's place in all of these trends is really macro trend agnostic. No matter where we are today, no matter where we were 5 years ago, no matter where it's going next. And I'm not the guy who says, okay, here's what's next. I'm the guy who says, whatever's next, you're still going to need data management. If it has to do with technology, you ain't getting there without the stuff that Anne-Marie, you and I have been talking about forever. and remain. It is so on the landscape, all these other things are happening at the surface, but that foundation, use that phrase, that term on purpose, that foundation of highly structured, well-governed, expertly stewarded master data, reference data, metadata has got to exist for any of these things to bring value to an organization.
Exactly. You mentioned all of the macro trends that are sucking up the space and the air and attention of leaders, of contributors, and of the general professional public. It really worries me when I see accountants talking about using data fabric versus data mesh. Accountants.
Yeah, that should not be an accounting discussion.
Yes, but they're just talking because it's available, something to talk about. What do you see as your role in bringing that awareness to the professional community about the value of that foundational data management, those practices you and I have been involved with for more years than I'd like to count? What do you see as the way to work with a company to make this a reality?
You got to get that at the same attention that's being paid to those big, sexy things. You've got to get that same audience in the room somehow and draw the connection between those wonderful trends and opportunities and the need for data management. And so what I do is I'm kind of top of the funnel in a marketing sense. I can be really big, I can be broad, I can be dramatic, I can be entertaining, I can, all those things. That's like my craft. That's what I do to get attention for this, to get people in the room, to get your foot in the door, to have them go, okay, this is important. And I characterize myself as really focusing on the why rather than the how. And part of the challenge, and I talk about it a lot in my book, is data management practitioners tend to focus on the how.
Mm-hmm.
How we're going to do it. Here's our data model. Here's, mesh versus fabric. Who the hell cares? If you're not going to get money for that, you're not going to get support, you're not going to get engagement from executive leadership, which we all know, run the companies. They make the big decisions. None of them care about the how until they understand the why. So focusing on that why in a really simple, direct, engaging fashion is critical to all of us out there in the data management space. I think it's critical across all of data, the whole data landscape, but those other areas have plenty of evangelists out there. They don't need more PR, but we do on this, and frustration's a perfect way to put it, Anne-Marie. Part of the impetus to write the book was a career I spent on the data supplier side. So my background, I worked at Nielsen for 15 years. I worked at Dun & Bradstreet for 1,000 days, but who's counting? I worked at WPP Kantar as a consultant, worked for the data provider side. But that gave me an opportunity to talk to every kind of company at every sector, at every level of data maturity all over the world. Again, limiting my scope there, but you start to see these patterns, and there was always somebody there in the data management side who had this combination of incredible frustration and this at least a glimmer of the passion and the value that they could bring to the organization with their discipline. And that's where the frustration came from, because nobody's listening to them. Because data management inherently is dull, it's boring, it's back office, it's clerical, it's old hat, ain't nothing new about MDM, right? Data quality, all these words we use that are just been around in a legacy vocabulary forever and are not breaking through. And part of my thesis was you got to change the nature of the vocabulary. You got to harmonize that vocabulary towards a voice that makes sense and is compelling. And you've got to aim it at the vision of the company, how it, why it enables the vision of the company. I just backed into what I call the 3 V's of data management storytelling: vocabulary, voice, and vision. Obviously, a little knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data, but trying to put these frameworks together to help people put that story together. And so, so I think I'm sort of like top level. Let me get them in the room. Let me have them go. What I try to do is get the right folks to go from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to how do we live without this? And then let somebody else take over and go, okay, yeah, that's That's what we got to get on. So, and it took me a while to realize some of those things I was ranting about before, that yes, data management is in the need for data management, data governance, and I kind of combine those two words again for simplicity's sake here.
Mm-hmm.
Making data, if you want to call it that, versus using data, is in everything we do. I didn't always see that, but now it's almost like a parlor game. It's like, all right, throw me a new trend here and I'll read up on it enough until I find the need for data management, because it's going to be in there. And
I have an example. Not too long ago, my husband and I were trying to find a particular show on Netflix. And my husband typed in a phrase into the search. And what came up was a bunch of stuff that had absolutely no relationship to this phrase. And I looked at him and I said, they have very poor metadata management. And he looked at me and he said, it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday night.
But
let's not talk about work right now, but you're right.
Well, I'm not talking about work. I'm talking about reality.
That's what I said.
It's so fun, right? When you recognize it, you see it everywhere. I have a similar anecdote going into checking my son into his college dorm a few years back, and we have his little key card, and it doesn't work. And I'm like, obviously the doorknob contraption works because the light turns red. The key works because you read it. And before I can say anything, I realize, okay, they haven't, changed his attribute in their system. And he just goes, I know, Dad, they have bad MDM. I know they have it. So it's just, our families have had to deal with this, but so it goes. It's everywhere, yes. Underneath everything. It's
absolutely
in any kind of incredible transformative customer experience, there is MDM, RDM, PIM, DAM, all those foundational activities that curate and steward all that and govern all that critical content. It can't happen without it. And right. So but that challenge is, if it is everywhere and people don't see it, how do you get them to recognize it? How do you get them right. to focus at that moment and go, wow, I never saw that before. I don't know if familiar with these magic eye optical illusion books, where it looks like a big random design, and then you look at it and you kind of focus on it clearly, and all of a sudden it's, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or a mountain.
Yes.
It's like that to me. It's like, there's your business and it's all this stuff going on, but if you just focus on, you can actually see it behind the scenes there. You can see that that's what's really happening. Mm-hmm. And it's gratifying to get folks to just recognize it, to go, oh, because once you see it, you're not going to not see it. And that's part of that evangelism. I call my practice data evangelism as a service, because you got to get people to believe it exists, right? Then you have to get them to practice that process, or however you
exactly.
And you've got to have that kind of spirit that leaps off the page or out of the screen or out of the chair to grab people, at least emotionally, by the collar and go, look, this is it. This is important. This is critical to everything else you do.
Paidi, I know you've got a bunch of questions. Fire away.
It was fantastic, and look, I suppose, guys, you put yourselves forward as the veterans nearly, of the industry, and interesting enough, I just picked it off to the side of the laptop here, guys. I think it was Tom Redman, and I think, Scott, you also referenced this quote. As a community, we have failed to educate leaders and craft messages that people will listen to, and I think the stuff you're doing, Scott, plays directly towards that, and just to maybe sort of summarize some of what's in the book. You talk about two types of storytelling. There's the with data storytelling, where we maybe use analytics, etc. But there's also then the about data, which is more about data management and the importance of it. And then you say, when you're telling those stories, you use vocab, voice, vision, the 3 V's. So You build a strong vision, you find the right vocab to describe so that people can understand how you play to that vision, and then the right voice. I'm intrigued though by something, Scott, that I definitely get the impression that you feel the voice of data management has been missing, and I suppose what I'm seeing in a lot of companies now is that we use the shiny toys, the AI, the machine learning, really to get the budgets for the data management initiatives. It's nearly hanging on to the coattails, but I get a sense that really annoys you.
What annoys me is the lack of recognition systemically at a strategic level of those folks who are out there proposing, let's say AI as an example in all its glorious iterations, and the lack of their recognition that they have to fund the data management part too, or that data management is going to be key to their success. And so I'm annoyed, I'm bemused, I'm surprised. I'm never surprised by things like, I'll give you two recent examples. Andrew Ng, who's one of the top leading data science guys. I haven't met him yet, but I've been tracking him a little bit. Huge breakthrough observation he made recently about how you should focus less on your model and more on the data going in. I mean, this is really,
revolutionary,
dog bites man kind of journalism here. It's like, real okay.
Really?
And he's going to start a campaign to make sure people understand that. So for me, there's really mixed emotions. One of it's like, okay, here's a really well-known leader who I hope to somehow draft on his, current to get people to realize, if you want to know why this is important, like 30 other reasons, I've got it. But on the other side, you just go, duh.
Really?
If we haven't said garbage in, garbage out enough, I don't know what we're doing. A second example, data mesh, which is, I think, arguably the hottest concept out there in the data space. And when I define hot in terms of coverage, the star quality, Zmat Kahani, if you've followed her, she's clearly a star. I saw her introduced on a webinar as the Lady Gaga of data. She's got all the trappings. She's great, right? She's great on camera, articulate, brilliant, wrote this book. She's become almost a high priestess. A lot of these meshies, as I like to refer to them, just are devoted to her every word. So, and I admire what she's doing from a storytelling perspective. Again, divorced from any form of understanding of the, application of the technology. But she said there were 4 tenets to the data mesh. And this is these guys, all these people preach these. I don't know, it's like, 1, 2, 3. But she said, after I did the first version, I realized I had to add a 4th pillar, which was federated data governance and the adoption of standards. It was like, bingo, if you had me in, that would have been So as I said before, it's there in everything. So am I thrilled that these analytic leaders are starting to talk about it? Yes. And what I find really hilarious is it's like they're sort of discovering it.
Mm-hmm.
If my grandson is 5, when he becomes 16, I'm sure he's going to come to me and go, Pop, you should hear this great group, but they're called the Beatles. So yeah, it's just like the same sort of, yes, now you're here. Oh, you should hear, Mozart. It's just, there's this recognition. I don't know if that's a perfect analogy, but you just got to do this for long enough.
And and Scott, what I found really interesting as well was, there's vertical value, and maybe an AI application might deliver vertical value. But you definitely somewhere, I can't remember where it was, Scott, you referred to data management delivering horizontal value.
Yeah,
because I think that's a key.
I talk a lot about this sort of geometric thing that I found really. Analytics is usually for a use case. It's for a department. It's, as a practice area, sure, it's across there, but an analytics effort singularly will help whatever that particular situation is. A data management effort, let's say a good customer master, will touch every part of the organization. And so when we have all these silos, you need a foundation. When you have all these verticals, you need a horizontal, even as something as simple as a table. I know there's a lot of fancier data visualization stuff. You have all these columns, you need the rows. And the simplest way I can think about it is data management are the rows, analytics are the columns. The only pushback I ever get on that sort of thing is, well, it's more complicated than that. I go, yeah, that's your problem to make it more complicated. My job is to what's the fewest number of words I can use to explain this? That's where I'm going. But yes, and when I discovered this kind of consistency of all right, silos and verticals and columns, and there's something in there that opens people's eyes to realize that. And everybody's had that trouble of taking two spreadsheets, banging them together. And they added columns, really easy to add columns, but really tough to align those rows.
Yes.
Take that same notion and blow it out across an entire marketplace. And then you have things like the rationale for the need for standards for, to drive interoperability, whether it's industry standards or common, so whatever it happens to be, that absolute requirement to have those things, have those rows aligned correctly, and the hierarchies and the taxonomies and the geographies, and then add the attributes later. But the attributes are what get, all the attention. But the columns are about the rows. That's what business is. Business is the rows. Customers, product,
and I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie shortly, but there's one thing I'm really interested, because in data quality and other areas, we've been struggling with that idea of horizontal value for a long time. Where's the magic, Scott? Let's say you go into an organization, and we talk about the importance of value, vocab, and the 3 V's. But what's magic? What do you bring to the equation when you go in? You've loads of energy, and I can see why you would be an evangelist. Is there more to it?
Well, when I was working for, the magic that I saw actually happen, and a lot of inspiration for my own work today is based on when I had what you could probably call more of a real job, which was working at Dun & Bradstreet, working at Nielsen, representing their master data services. So steeped in that world of helping people realize they needed a quality customer master, product master, hierarchies, taxonomies. And the magic that I start to see is where I started to see the sparks happen is having somebody at the senior level who was not that aware of what data would even do, realize, okay, we've got to make sure to fund this. We've got to make sure to support this. And today what I do is just try and help people build that story, whatever it happens to be, whether it's through the book, whether it's through my events, whether it's through kind of my, approach to content, whether it's through either the kind of more serious video stuff I do or things that I'm going to be focusing more on, which is the wackier, more entertaining kind of ways to tell the same message, whether it's puppets or cartoons, or if you haven't seen it yet, we'll give you some links to put in the podcast, reading a data story to my grandson. Those kinds of things are really fun for me because it just kind of breaks through. But the message I believe is really serious, which is you can boil my entire data philosophy down to 3 words, which is why I'm wearing this hat: truth before meaning. You got to determine the truth in data before you derive meaning from it. The truth comes from data management, data governance, data stewardship. The meaning comes from analytics, business intelligence, data science. But it's not chicken or egg here. It's egg and omelet. If you don't have that truth first, you will not get the meaning that you're looking for. And it's that sort of simplicity of message, I think, helps break through.
I love the egg and the omelet metaphor. Absolutely. Because without the egg, there is no omelet. Without the truth of master data management, high quality data, well-defined data for metadata, and well-governed data with the policies and standards, you can't have truth. And without truth, there is no meaning. However, what happens when a leader in an organization with whom you are consulting says, all I want to do is buy some tools and the tools will save us?
I mean, that's, to use the omelet example, if just because you bought a frying pan doesn't mean you know how to cook. And I stay out of sort of the tool selection thing these days, but trying to help folks realize, again, through analogies, simple way to communicate, that tool's not going to fix it. And I've got lots of, fun examples of showing what happens in software and so on. But that, all of those, it's staying consistent on that message that tool piece does not fix the fact that you've got 28 places to do customer create because you're spread all over the organization. And that's why you have all these duplicates. And that's why your hierarchies suck. And that's why your categorizations are inconsistent. And tools don't fix that. They just enable that, as we all know. If you've got, load your kitchen with, the latest ninja foodie and set it and forget it. But if the ingredients aren't any good, you're still going to make a garbage meal. It's just, all I do is just riff off the same thing. It's just really just how many different ways can we say the same thing? And persistence is key. Having a background in sales and marketing, you got to just keep at it to get people to realize in their own terms, in their own way, however they get there, that, oh, okay, this is important. It's all. How
did you get from a sales and marketing experience to this?
Well, what I find particularly amazing in today's world is this idea of how important a story is. And I've been storytelling my entire life. That's all we ever did. My family, some families play, touch football, some do, others say, all we did was tell stories. My father was a great storyteller. My mother, humor, ways of conveying things. If you brought a friend over to dinner, my dad would characterize them based on whether they told a good story or not. That person didn't bring anything to the party. They made that moment. It was like he looked for that in a way critically. So coming from that background, and sales is telling a story. If you can't tell a story in sales, you ain't making quota. Marketing is kind of scaling that story, making it more strategic and accessible, but it's all based on storytelling. My role at both Nielsen and D&B with perspective now ended up being getting their stories right. Telling a story at Nielsen about a 30-year-old database they had of supermarkets that we converted into a universal standard in the consumer packaged goods world. That the difference was the story. We didn't change the data. When I got there was this database of every store in the country, and everybody had bought it, and they came in and out. They called it a store list. They called what they did matching. It had all these really boring sounding clerical words, but the notion of having the ability for somebody to outsource their customer master maintenance in the case of, let's say, Coca-Cola or Pepsi or these large consumer packaged goods companies, and having somebody curate and manage and steward that location data for them was pretty different in those days, especially with the kind of focus we had. Then I go to D&B. They're the great grand old, monster in this space in terms of identification of companies and hierarchy and the rest of it all over the globe, but their story was terrible. They didn't know how to talk about what they did in master data. One of my biggest achievements there was actually to get the right terminology, talk about vocabulary, on their website. So the words master data never appeared together. And early on, I was there for 3 weeks. I met one of their 7-8-figure clients in master data, and she pulled me aside at this customer event, and she goes, they recognized pretty quickly that I understood it and that I was already helping. I'd only been there for like 3 weeks. And she goes, I know why I'm buying it, but they don't know why they're selling it to me. That's a pretty devastating thing to hear from a customer. And that sums up the conundrum they were in. They didn't know why people, as an organization, they didn't know why. The CEO there didn't know why. The head of product didn't know why. The CIO knew. The data people knew. They were like, yeah, we're doing this all day long, but they weren't there to tell the story. So my role there was really storytelling. And speaking of long-winded stories, I'll just keep going here. So you kind of infuse that with my background, surprise, surprise, in dramatic arts. So when I was in college, I wasn't a dramatic arts major, but I did a lot of plays and theater, and I draw on that training literally every single day and love it. I love being on stage. I love, the performance angle of it. I tell people I have a fear of not public speaking. So that gave me this chance in my career to be kind of the speaker. So I would go for those opportunities. We're sponsoring an event and they need somebody to speak. I'll do that, or I'll run a panel. And I just love, now I do events as part of my repertoire to get paid to go and do a keynote of some sort somewhere. And so I think this combination is really, I feel like I finally gotten to where I needed to be. This background in experience of the data side from a sales and marketing angle, but understanding it well enough to be able to articulate it back to folks in a relevant way. And what happens is the feedback I get that I like, some of the feedback I like the most, when I was at Dun & Bradstreet, I would go in for these kind of command performance meetings because I could get the IT department would say, we've got to renew the D&B master data stuff, but the business doesn't understand how critical it is. As part of this, can you come in? We're putting it all together as a proposal. Can you come in and just explain it, make sure they understand? And they love, because I can just, get these people excited about it. And then afterwards, more times than not, the account people would call me and say, oh, they love what you did. That's great. They want you on the account. I go, no, they don't. They don't. This is it. You saw what I do. That's it. There's no depth there. Okay, I'm really thin. I'm really shallow, but I'm good at it. We all have a position to play. I play mine well, but I stick to my position. You don't want me touching anything. Even though I understand it, I've never actually done it. Surprise, surprise. Big secret here. So that was, but it showed there was, I had a valid way and a way to connect with these people at an emotional level to really understand either their needs or their pain or their passion or whatever emotion was in there. So,
Paidi.
Yeah, I love the honesty of that, Scott. I love the storytelling, and it reminds me as well, Scott. Again, how you've said, please don't go in and lead with oil. Data is the new oil, so don't go in with that really sort of abstract concept. But you also say don't go in and talk about maybe the nuts and bolts, data quality, data management. So you're obviously saying it needs to be something else. And I love the phrase you had somewhere was, illuminate the business vision.
Right.
Use your story to show how data will illuminate the business vision. And I think there's a beautiful simplicity in that message, and I think look, I don't know if you've any comments on that, but I think for me that just nails it, that we need people that can go in and do that, which is the bridge for me, the bridge between this really esoteric stuff and the nuts and bolts.
I always, as you've probably learned already, Paidi, I've a comment about everything. That illuminate the business vision came from my sales background of, let's say you had to go in and sell to Coca-Cola. Why would they want this? And what I did was I developed this own personal technique. It's not unique just to me, but I think I hopefully helped popularize it through the book, which was go in and find out where that company's trying to go. What is Coca-Cola trying to do? And the way to go see what their leaders say. Did their head of sales speak somewhere? What's in their annual report? What's in their investor day presentation? Nowhere will you find the statement that one of our top initiatives at the Coca-Cola company is to improve our data quality. That doesn't happen. They don't say that. They don't care. But they will talk about transformational initiatives. Again, I'm speaking very generically. And if in those transformational initiatives, you will find domains mentioned like customer and product, and you can very quickly and distinctly draw a connection between these visionary statements of the leadership of a company and the need for better data management. And so that technique, I urge everybody in the data management space at their organization to do. So when they get that moment, they're not talking about how anything. They're not talking about, we have all these duplicates and we can't tie our thing, and finance is different definition than operations. I mean, we know, and they get all frustrated, and data quality, and we need data quality. Again, I pick on the word, with all respect to Tom Redman and the great data quality advocates out there. As a sales pitch, data quality doesn't work. If it did, then 30 years after Tom wrote the article about data quality, he wouldn't be referencing about how our messages are so difficult to listen to. Okay, there's one example. So it's important, it's critical. You got to have it, you got to measure it. Just don't use it as part of the pitch, because who cares? And if you do a good enough pitch about data quality, somebody's going to go, why? Why do we need it? Answer that why before they even ask it. And that why is in those visionary leadership initiative statements that the executives make at your organization, in the annual report, in your investor day presentation, in your strategy town halls, in their interview with CNBC. I mean, I sit there, talk about, same kind of thing, Anne-Marie, with your husband. I watched CNBC with my partner, and she's listening to the head of somebody. I'm like, oh, that guy needs, MDM. Oh, he's not going to get that done without, she's talking about doing this or that. I said, oh, I wish I was selling, because we could go get them this kind of data. They're not talking about data even at all, almost. They're talking about, we've got better segmentation and targeting and serving up a customer experience, whatever those things are. They all have, again, the way I boil it down, if it takes technology is hardware, software, data, you need data management. You just, there's no, I challenge people to break that for me. Tell me I'm wrong. Show me a place where technology doesn't work without data management, or technology works without data management. It's like, again, another parlor game here, but it's in there, but you've gotta find it. You've gotta illuminate it, as I said. And the visionary part isn't necessarily a vision for your data management practice. Your vision should be why data management enables the strategic intentions of your enterprise, where your company's trying to go, why data management will help. It's not the only thing, but without it, you're not going to get there. Help you get there and speak their language. Yeah. And it's, when I went to Coca-Cola, we had a great meeting at Coca-Cola. I went to Coca-Cola. We had a chance to meet with the CEO of Coca-Cola and his leadership team, the VP of marketing, all the rest of them. I put up a statement about the importance of customer relations and deepening that process and making it more streamlined, whatever it was. It was some kind of thing around that. I put that up there as a quote. I read it, and I got some chutzpah coming from the dramatic arts, but I said, I know you agree with this because, next slide was his picture. You said it. Now, if you said this and you believe this, in this bold way, we've got this element that you are going to need, and we've done the due diligence here to find out what you got and what you don't. That's going to help enable that. And that open the door for the rest of the sales staff, customer service, or whatever. But you get that 7 minutes. In that case, it was 6 different Nielsen companies coming in a 30-minute, 40-minute slot, and we all had a chance to go up there. We got a call back. Not all of them did.
And I think that's really impressive, Scott, because that brings us back again to the 3 V's: vision, know what the vision is, what the business vision is. We're trying to illuminate that, finding the right vocab, the right words, and then the voice, how you present it, or that excitement or whatever else. And Marie, we need to start landing this plane, in terms of this, this session. Over to you. Is there a final few words or a question or something, Anne-Marie, on your side?
Actually, I have about 1,000 questions for Scott.
Do a part 2 if you want, whenever.
Yeah, I'd really like to delve more into contents in your book, which I find incredibly illuminating, because everybody talks about data storytelling, as you mentioned earlier, in the data science, analytics, business intelligence frame. Nobody, except for a few people you and I know, including yourself, really talk about storytelling for data management. And when they say data management, the people who talk about it often only focus on one aspect of data management. I like your approach, where it's all the disciplines of data management are of equal value in telling that story. And I'd like to explore that in the future, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. We can explore any of that. And again, I do it for simplicity's sake. So I get picked on like, okay, well, it's not data management, it's data governance. Or there's this other really annoying debate going on in LinkedIn lately about, well, you know, maybe it's not data governance, maybe it's data enablement.
Oh,
it's like,
please.
just change. We're talking to ourselves here. Okay. We're just bickering. Part of the reason I hate data is the new oil is because there are multiple opinions about it. And I don't fall on any, you know, it's the new oil because it brings value when you refine it, but it's not oil because I'm thinking about it literally. Oil you use once and data sustain. You've just proved the point that whether it's an analogy or a simile or a metaphor, you're confusing people because as a data community, we don't agree on what data the new oil means. And I can go on and on, you know, I go on in the book about how one of those articles that was written about it is actually about oil being as a metaphor for restricting the flow and the big oil companies being like the big data providers out there, which is definitely not a positive story. But taking a step back, it's like if you want to communicate, the reason you have imagery is to shorten the time to understanding. So if you're going to come in and do your big pitch about why data is so valuable to the organization, you're going to start with a metaphor that actually isn't original. Then you got to explain it. Then you got to make sure everybody knows which side you're on. You're 15 minutes in here, okay? Into probably what's going to end up being a 20-minute meeting because people are they're asking the why question. And in that case, it's why are we even having this meeting? Who is this person? What are they talking about? So just, you know, get better at the craft is my last word of advice in terms of the data practitioners out there. Storytelling is a craft. It is a discipline. I don't expect you, I'm not bragging. I don't expect to be at my level. This is all I do. I am not at your level in terms of a data practitioner, that's for sure. But know that this isn't something, it's something you should spend time on if you want to be a successful data leader, because communication is critical to any career. And what you're communicating about has a lot of competition in your organization because marketing tells a better story than you do. Sales tells a better story than you do. Finance, they have to listen to. Legal, they can't ignore. So you're up against a whole bunch of different voices, and you got to be able to break through and get your fair share of attention.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. You know, sometimes the best capabilities don't get the funding or the funding they deserve, Scott, and also I suppose you know, if people do want to know more, there's the book, Scott, you know, telling your data story. Where can people find out more about you, Scott? Where
I'm
are
all
you
over
active?
LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. I've got a YouTube channel that's where I just kind of put everything. All my videos are on there. Again, the puppet shows, the cartoons, the more serious stuff. And my website, metametaconsulting.com. Metameta, we're about what it's about. That's why we've got that name. We talking about data. No, we're not changing our name to Facebook either. So I get that question. And I'm there. I'm out there in the community. Just, you know, I love doing this. This was fun. I can't believe we got 45 minutes or an hour already. I just whizzing by here. I could talk all day as you.
And we could have, you know, yeah. And look, I think it's been a fantastic session, Scott. I'd really recommend people look at your LinkedIn stuff. That's where I'd follow probably and that brings you into the YouTube channel. There must be dozens and dozens of videos there, Scott. I watch them every so often. So I think well worth for our audience just to have a look at that. Scott and Marie, thank you so much for a fantastic session.
Thank you, Paidi. And thank you, Scott. This was so entertaining as I knew it would be.
Thank you. This was a blast.